The restaurant on 5th Street. A gentle pause. Eleanor Chen smoothed her dress for the 3rd time, sitting alone at the corner table of Romano's. 54 years old, and here she was on a blind date her sister had arranged. The restaurant was modest, checkered tablecloths, the scent of garlic and tomatoes, Frank Sinatra playing softly in the background. It reminded her of simpler times. Soft breath. She'd been alone for 5 years now since her divorce. Her ex-husband had left her for someone younger, someone who fit better into his corporate world. Eleanor had taken her half of everything and opened a bookstore. Not glamorous, but it was hers. She'd learned that happiness wasn't always found in the big moments. Sometimes it lived in the quiet pages of a good novel and a cup of tea at closing time. A moment of reflection. The door opened, and a man walked in. He wore a slightly worn jacket, jeans that had seen better days, and carried himself with a gentleness that immediately put her at ease. His eyes, warm and brown, found hers across the room. He smiled, not the practiced smile of someone trying to impress, but something real. "Eleanor?" he asked, approaching the table. "That's me. You must be James." The sound of a chair being pulled out. James Holloway sat down, and she noticed his hands, working hands with calluses that spoke of physical labor. Her sister had said he was a contractor, someone who fixed things for a living. In Eleanor's experience, people who knew how to fix things were often the ones who understood that broken didn't mean worthless. "I hope you haven't been waiting long," he said. "There was an issue at one of my job sites, a roof leak that couldn't wait." Gentle, measured. "I just got here myself," Eleanor said kindly. "A roof leak sounds urgent. I'm glad you could still make it." They ordered simply, spaghetti for her, lasagna for him, a bottle of house red to share. As they talked, Eleanor found herself relaxing in a way she hadn't expected. James didn't try to impress her with stories of success or ambition. Instead, he asked about her bookstore, genuinely curious about her favorite authors, about what brought people through her door. With warmth. "I think people come in looking for more than just books," Eleanor said thoughtfully. "They're looking for connection, for stories that remind them they're not alone in whatever they're feeling." James nodded slowly. "That's beautiful. Most people spend their whole lives looking for that kind of connection and never find it." A pause, meaningful. Over the next few weeks, they saw each other often. James would pick her up in his old pickup truck, paint splattered and reliable. They'd go to diners where the coffee was strong and the pie was homemade. They'd walk through parks as the late autumn turned to winter, talking about everything and nothing. He told her about his work, how satisfying it was to take something broken and make it whole again. How he'd learned his trade from his father, who'd taught him that honest work was its own reward. Eleanor loved how his face lit up when he talked about helping a young family fix their home, or an elderly woman repair her porch. Soft reflection. She didn't care that he drove an old truck or wore the same jacket every time they met. She'd learned long ago that wealth didn't live in bank accounts. It lived in the way someone listened, the way they remembered small details, the way they showed up when they said they would. One evening, James invited her to dinner at his place. "It's nothing fancy," he'd warned her. "Just a small apartment above a warehouse in the old district. A gentle transition." But when Eleanor arrived, she found herself in a spacious loft with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city lights. The space was beautifully designed. Exposed brick, carefully chosen furniture, shelves lined with books she'd mentioned loving. Classical music played softly from speakers she couldn't see. James stood in the kitchen looking suddenly nervous. He'd traded his worn jacket for a simple sweater, but his hands were the same steady hands that had held hers during their walks. A moment of truth. "Eleanor," he said quietly, "I need to tell you something, and I hope you'll understand why I waited." She set down her purse, her heart beating a little faster. "All right," with measured honesty. "My last name isn't just Holloway. Well, you might have heard of Holloway Construction and Development. My father started it 40 years ago. When he passed 5 years ago, I took over as CEO. We're one of the largest firms in the state." Eleanor stood very still, processing. "You're a millionaire." Several times over, he admitted, looking almost apologetic. "But Eleanor, I need you to understand. After my father died, everyone I met wanted something from me. The company, the money, the connections. I was so tired of not knowing if people saw me or just saw what I could give them." A pause, heavy with emotion. He moved closer but didn't reach for her. "When your sister arranged our date, she didn't know who I was. She just knew I was someone who worked in construction. And when I met you that first night, when you smiled at me like I was just James, it was the first time in years I felt seen." Eleanor's mind whirled. She thought of the old truck, probably one he kept from his father. The worn jacket, likely his favorite because it was comfortable, not because it was all he could afford. The small restaurants, chosen not from necessity but from a desire for genuine connection. Softly, with understanding. "You lied to me," she said gently, but without anger. "I held back the truth," James corrected quietly. "But everything else, every conversation, every moment, that was real. My feelings for you, Eleanor, those are the realest thing in my life." A long, gentle pause. Eleanor walked to the window, looking out at the city lights. She thought about her ex-husband, who'd wanted her to be someone she wasn't. She thought about all the years she'd spent learning to value authenticity over appearance. And she thought about James, how he'd listened, how he'd shown up, how he'd been kind to waitresses and held doors for strangers, with warmth and wisdom. She turned back to him. "Do you know what I've learned, James? In all my years running a bookstore, reading thousands of stories, the truth always matters less than the intention behind it. You weren't trying to trick me. You were trying to find something real in a world that had taught you to be suspicious." His eyes brightened with hope. "So you're not angry?" Gentle resolution. "I'm not angry," Eleanor said, moving toward him. "I'm grateful. Because you trusted me enough to eventually tell the truth. And because for the first time since my divorce, I met someone who wanted to know me. Not for what I could be, but for who I am." James took her hands in his. Those calloused, capable hands. I do have those calluses, by the way. I still work on sites sometimes. It keeps me grounded. Reminds me where I came from. Eleanor smiled. "Good. I like your hands just the way they are." Final words, warm and steady. They had dinner that night in his beautiful loft, and talked about honesty and second chances and how love, real love, was built not on perfect truth but on the willingness to be vulnerable. Outside the windows, the city glowed like a constellation of earthbound stars. And Eleanor thought how funny life was, how she'd gone looking for nothing more than companionship, and found instead someone who reminded her that wealth came in many forms, the richest of which was being truly known. Gentle fade. The end character count, 59998.